Hello there, and welcome back to Just Another Star Wars podcast. Today, we are going to discuss Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I am here with my friend Mike. How
How's
you
it
doing,
going?
Mike?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. So first things first, you're old enough to have gone to the theater. What was your experience like?
Seeing episode 3. We got tickets for, I believe it was a 7 p.m. show. I don't know why I remember that, but I do. 7 p.m. the day it came out. So it would have been May 19th of 2005, if I'm not mistaken. And we were seeing it at you'll know this theater. It's at the mall in Ogden, the Cinemark, I think it is.
Oh, yeah.
So it was there, and they had everyone lined up inside where all the carpeted areas were. And there were people playing board games of Star Wars trivia and stuff like that.
That's
And
cool.
there was a girl going up against all these guys, and she knew nothing about Star Wars. And so every guy in the audience was kind of like pitching in answers and stuff. And the final answer for her to win, because she ended up winning because everyone was helping her outside of the game, was what battle was Lando famous for before the movies, or something to that degree. And I was like, oh, I know this one. And I go, I don't. And then I just go, Tanab. And then everyone goes, how did you do that? So that question won the game.
Wow.
And
wow, even I didn't know that.
yeah, I think I learned it from when I was playing the Star Wars trivia game. I was trying to memorize some of the answers, and that was one of the questions that just stuck with me.
Oh, he mentions it in episode 5.
6.
Was that episode 6?
Yeah, when they're like, oh, General, huh? He's like, well, someone must have mentioned my little maneuver back at Tanab or something like that. And so I remember doing that and then seeing it. And I went with your brother David, actually, and my dad and sister and all that. They came, we all went
Makes
together.
sense. Yeah.
And David and I were like, okay, let's save the popcorn for during the movie. So we wouldn't eat it during the trailer. We put it on the floor. And then we forgot about it once the movie started because
you were just so zoned in.
And so afterwards, we're driving home and I'm just munching on popcorn. And then I saw it again with my mom that Saturday. I waited in line for, I don't know, 1 to 3 hours, somewhere in there. Just sitting outside in the Leighton Theater. But yeah, so I was just sitting in line for a while, and I was just reading a book, I think, probably a Star Wars book, waiting, holding our place in line, because back then you didn't have the reserved seating that you do now.
Nope.
And so, like, I waited 3 hours in lines for movies all the time because I wanted a good seat. And I remember when we get to, as we're going to talk about, when Darth Vader awakes, as the scene is called. Once I had already seen it, I knew what to expect. Right. So when the second viewing at the theater, when Darth Vader's getting the mask actually put on him, the crowd was absolutely silent, like silent as a tomb. And I was able to recognize it without really like being so dialed in because I'd already seen it. So it's really cool when you see a movie that you really love and know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because you can gauge the audience reactions at certain moments.
And I think that's also a great thing. I mean, I was only, 11 years old when that movie came out back in 2005. And I remember all the reactions of the audience, every single one of them, I mean, and that was my first time really experiencing something like that. I was like this huge fandom and everybody just going nuts. Like, I remember my experience going like to episode 1 and episode 2, but I don't really remember a whole lot.
Because you're so much younger, yeah.
Right. When it comes to episode 3, like the reactions it made the experience so much better. Like when the scroll hit, everybody started cheering, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but a couple scenes with R2, people were laughing, people were cheering, it was great. So I think, I definitely agree. I think especially an audience's reaction like that makes somebody else's experience a lot better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with you.
I don't know if you think this, because you and I, we tend to differ from one another.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. We have similar tastes, but different opinions on those same tastes.
Which is definitely not a bad thing. And and one thing I like to do promoting this channel is we do it respectfully of one another. We're not like, oh, you're stupid for having this opinion. No.
Right.
You got your opinion, I got mine.
Yeah. Doesn't change how I feel about you at all. I'm just like, he's just wrong. It's okay.
No, but in my opinion, I think that episode three's opening is the best one.
Out of all 11
Out
live
of
action,
yeah,
I would actually agree with you there because the way that the ships come down and you have
uh-huh.
the soft force theme, but it's more militaristic, and then they
Yeah.
go down and bam, there's a huge battle. Like I don't think there's been an experience like that in the cinema in terms of Star Wars,
No,
where you're
definitely
just
not.
like immediately like, holy cow, what's going on? Than the original one when the Tantive 4 is being chased by the Star
Exactly.
Destroyer.
Like it's kind of slow and you see the ships and like it's intense and everything like that. But with episode three, like at the very beginning, after the crawl ends and it fades the music, um, like you hear the war drums, boom, boom,
Mm-hmm.
boom, boom, and then the music builds up, you know,
Yeah,
and then
John
you got the
Williams is a
ships
master.
flying in right as it builds up to the Jedi theme song.
Yeah, the music really made that scene. The scene itself is fantastic.
Yeah.
Just before they go down and descend into the battle, the scene itself is fantastic, and John Williams' score is what really put the bow on top that made it beautiful.
I feel like he just outdoes himself every single time.
Yeah, there's some. I was thinking about this the other day because I listen to a lot of soundtracks, as you know. Hans Zimmer, love Hans Zimmer.
Great.
But my thing with Hans Zimmer is he has like 3 songs in each movie, but he replays them a lot. But those 3 songs are absolute bangers.
Yeah.
Whereas John Williams will take the same score and really reinvent it. I mean, the Force theme that you listen to when Luke's staring at the sunset in Episode 4 versus the Force theme or theme we hear at the beginning of this, where it's more militaristic. Night and day difference.
Oh, way different.
Brings it back, and it's insane.
I don't know. In that first shot, when you just see the ships just flying in, it's just so pretty. You see, in the background, you see the outline of Coruscant with the city lights and everything like that, and then you see a battle just above that, and then another one above that, and then you're immersed in the main battle. And I was always curious, why would they make their headsets metal?
It enhances their force abilities. I'm kidding. I have no idea.
Because I mean, like it goes into the ship, and you would assume they would have something comfortable, like at least a little bit of padding. But it's like a full metal bar.
Yeah, see a metal bar up above, because I know that he specifically with the original trilogy, like when you look at the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon and stuff, was all inspired by real World War II ships, and so I could see like him wanting to get something similar. But yeah, there's got to be some sort of padding. I mean.
Yeah,
Anakin's got a lot of hair to kind of cover it up, but
Obi
doesn't. This is why he hates flying. We found it out.
These headsets are so uncomfortable.
Yeah, he hates flying with other people. By himself, he's okay. So the thing I love about this movie too, in reference to specifically the prequel trilogy, the other two start very slowly by comparison. Especially episode 2, because they're flying kind of lazily through Coruscant, and it's just kind of really slow. I mean, we're excited to watch it, of course. Before the ship blows up, and then kind of the same thing happened in episode 1, where it's really slow until they land, and then they're like walk down the Trade Federation. Here it's just like, oh, you have a brief moment of, oh, this is a really cool scene, and then all of a sudden, holy cow, what is going on?
Yeah,
and it just it hits the ground running more or less, and it really kickstarts the whole story from the get-go. It doesn't waste any time.
Now that I think about it, as you're talking, I wonder if that's his intention, George Lucas's. Because in episode 1, it builds up to where, they land, they wait. It's kind of like lingering in a way. And then all of a sudden, all right, we're going to kill these Jedi. And then it builds up. Episode 2 was a little bit more quick. You see them fly through space, they land, boom, ship blows up. Episode 3, you're instantly in it.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I had to rank the orders, at least of the prequel trilogies of the beginnings, I'd go episode 3, 1, 2, because no one really cared about the ship being blown up in 2 as much as episode 1 in my mind. Because episode 1, it was like the Jedi activate their lightsabers, and all of a sudden there's poison gas, and then there's battle droids, and there's a lot of action right there that you want to see as these Jedi. Episode 2 is like, oh, the ship's blown up. Oh, it's not Padme, it's a decoy. Okay, we don't care about this person who just died. And that's kind of the beginning scene.
Yeah.
And then the third one, it just kickstarts the rest of the Battle of Coruscant, which I think I read somewhere, heard somewhere that George Lucas, actually the original cut of it, was an hour long by itself from start to finish, from the time that they like rescue the Chancellor, spoiler alert, and land to like the beginning. I think it was an hour long by itself. He had to cut a lot or like it was planned that there was a lot that was going to be shot and they had to cut a lot, and that explains a lot of the deleted scenes too that take place during that battle. If you've ever seen all the deleted scenes for Ep 3,
Oh yeah.
but a lot of them take place during the battle, and I think that's why, because they have the one where they're talking in droid beeps. They have the one where General Grievous kills Shock T.
Shock T. I remember that one.
And there was one where they were supposed to be swimming through the something or other.
That's when he kills Shock T, and he's like doing the nose flick, and he twists his mustache, and then they end up cutting the floor and dropping down, and they start walking through the water. So I was watching Clone Wars. There's an episode where they get attacked by buzz droids, and Anakin just force pushes them off.
While he's on his ship or something?
Yeah, he's flying his ship, and they're on top, and he just...
See...
Why didn't Obi-Wan do that?
They shouldn't have done that in the show, because it then says, why didn't he do that in the movie? You can't have them outdo themselves from the movie, the main canon, if you will. You can't just do that, especially if it's something before. If it was, let's say, afterwards, like let's say in Bad Batch, we saw Obi-Wan in his ship and buzz droids got on there and he force pushed, like, oh, he learned something from how to deal with them. But you can't have him, I know it was Anakin, but you can't have Anakin do that, because he could have said force push him, master, and then he could have just done it. Or he could have force pulled them, something.
I mean, I think they were trying to make up for that in the fact that later on he like turns over and there's a bunch of them on the bottom of his ship.
Maybe.
I don't know. That's why I'm questioning it. Why didn't Obi-Wan just... He'd be fine.
It wasn't written like that.
I mean, I guess in times this movie came out before that. So, because Clone Wars didn't air until what, 2008?
Yeah, 2008. This was 2005, so...
Is there anything else about the battle that you liked?
More of, the duel between Dooku and the two Jedi. Specifically with Anakin and Dooku, when they flip off of the thing and then they're really going at it. I really enjoyed that part of the battle. I don't like how easily he beats Obi-Wan, but I know that it makes sense because of their lightsaber styles. It's just that
right.
It was actually more for blaster fire, because that's what they mostly were.
That would make sense.
Blaster fire. So, and then Form 2 is all about dueling, which basically the way I look at it is one-handed dueling, right, is what he does. So 2 beats 3, it's like rock, paper, scissors. But 5, which is what Anakin does, is about power. And so it overpowers the one-handed Dooku. And so it's like rock, paper, scissors, almost. And technically, Obi-Wan did beat Darth Vader a couple times. So if you think about it, it actually still works between the 3 of them. I don't know if I would say that 3 has an inherent advantage over 5. It just depends on the strength of the individuals.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the 2-3 thing, I've always looked at it is just, it's like Pokemon. Like if they have a weakness to water, they're just weak to water. 3's weakness is 2, 2's weakness is 5. Because even when you and I have done it in like the park or whatever, done sword fighting, and you're trying to do one-handed, you can't handle the strength because doing one-handed is a lot more difficult. So imagine an 80-year-old man one-handed against a 20-year-old guy full force. Like, of course, he's going to lose that.
Yeah,
Except in, of course, Attack of the Clones. But that was his own hubris that done him in. It wasn't because Dooku was necessarily better.
I think Dooku kind of has the upper hand, not only because he's been, doing this much longer than the 2 of them, especially considering that he was Obi-Wan's master.
Yeah, but him and Qui-Gon had different styles. Qui-Gon's a Form 4.
Right, and I think especially me trying to learn Form 2, it's a very, like, you also have to move a lot. It's not really essentially attacking, but it's more of...
It's almost like, deflecting until you can get the upper hand. Whereas, like, when you do with Form 3, you just defend until you can find an opening. And it's just more about your stamina and perseverance and being able to be aware of the situation.
Right. Like, think of it as like fencing, that type of style. A lot of footwork, a lot of movement to the side.
Special angles that you have to really be aware of.
But going back to episode 2, you do see on occasion Dooku using 2 hands.
Right. I think they just do that when they're kind of being put in the corner kind of thing, or when they're starting to be on their last leg, they're like, okay, I need this extra energy. Or it could just be he has arthritis and he needs something else to help. Who knows? But for real, I do think that they do that, like especially if, let's say, he did that more, and I think we see him actually use two hands a lot more with Anakin at the very, very end of episode 3. The very, very end of their fight, he's using a lot more of two hands, and it could be he's getting fatigued. It could be that he can't handle the power that's coming at him with just simple deflection, because Anakin is just unrelenting.
Yeah.
And so that's my thoughts on that.
I mean, he is handling a power that he doesn't really understand. I mean, he's only 19 at that time in episode 2, but now it's what, 22, 23?
He'd be 22.
22 in episode 3?
It's 3 years of the war. I know.
You've done a lot in 3 years.
They did. They fit how many seasons?
7?
Something like that, yeah. Not to mention a movie.
Getting back to that fight, why didn't Dooku spill the beans about Palpatine? Like, he literally just looked at him. Palpatine's like, sorry, bro. Why didn't Dooku be like, bro, that's the Sith Lord you're looking for?
I would say that, now, I don't think there's ever going to be a specific reason, unless it's mentioned in canon. It's all head canon, right? It's all theories. One theory you could say, this is one that just popped up in my head, is that he knew it would be useless. Because, let's say, he says, he's the Sith Lord. I'm not the one you're looking for, it's him. Who's he been fighting for 3 years? Dooku. Who's he been friends with for 13 years? Palpatine. Who's he going to believe?
But I mean, here's the thing. Why wouldn't you trust Dooku in the fact that he is the number 2 to the Sith Lord? Because everybody at this point knows the rule of 2.
I don't know how they know that.
Why wouldn't they inform the other Jedi?
But why would they?
Because everybody knows about the Sith at this time now.
Well, now, but they just still didn't know there was a rule of 2. No one told them there was a rule of 2. George Lucas wrote it in episode 1.
Yeah.
But they didn't specify how the Jedi even knew that the Sith were around, because they were like, oh, they've been gone for millennia. Always 2 there are. No, They've been gone for millennia, Yoda. Always 2. What are you talking about, man? Where'd you learn this? Yoda's in on it.
No, it's not.
But I would say...
He said that because... Jeez Louise.
You're welcome.
Because regardless if the Sith are back or not, there's always going to be the rule of 2.
But the rule of 2 was a secret rule.
That's what he's talking about.
Right, but the rule of 2 is a secret rule. The Jedi didn't even know about it. Basically, here's how the old...
So how did Yoda know about it?
That's what I'm saying. So...
Maybe the High Republic.
The old canon, there was Darth Bane, right? He becomes a Sith Lord, and the problem with the Sith fighting the Jedi is the Sith are also fighting each other for more power. So he says, you're all wrong. The Jedi are going to wipe us out. So he tricks the Sith into destroying themselves, more or less. He survives and takes a Padawan in secret, and secretly, like Palpatine, was manipulating things from the back through influence, power, and money. And he slowly was amassing wealth through the generations of Sith. Whenever the master was beaten by the apprentice, they basically inherited it. They would get a new apprentice. They would still be amassing power, wealth, influence, and be doing things on the back end. But it was a secret thing. That's why the Jedi thought that they were extinct for a millennia. So if they thought they were extinct, because before that, it was a war between Jedi and Sith. So there was never a rule of 2. Yoda just knew it. Now, keep in mind, that is old canon. I don't know the official story of the new canon yet, because I haven't really delved into that to my knowledge. But it still doesn't make sense why Yoda would know that there's a rule of 2.
Well, we know that Bane is canon.
Bane's canon, yes. And so I'm assuming that the rule of 2 is canon, but it doesn't mean that Yoda or any other Jedi should know about it, because that would mean they had some sort of interaction with the Sith sometime within that 1,000 years. And Yoda's 900 years old, so it's possible, but then the Sith wouldn't be extinct for a millennia.
Maybe they have some sort of holocron with Sith.
They could have found it, but then they would know that the Sith were still around instead of extinct. You know what I mean? Like, there's a little, to me, that's a plot hole that they haven't really filled in with the new canon yet. It's just that Yoda knew about a rule of 2. And it could be that George Lucas just wanted it to be a rule of 2 Sith, and that's how it always was. But then the old canon writers just built up this whole legacy of what was going on, and it just hasn't been retconned enough. But anyways, so going back to Dooku not betraying his master, imagine you're fighting Hitler, okay? And I'm not going to say let me think of someone who's
I'm gonna cut
Gandhi is
that.
your best friend. Gandhi's your best friend. Hitler's your enemy. You've been friends with Gandhi for 13 years. You're fighting Hitler for 3. He cut off your arm. He is about to die, and on his last leg, he's like, "Hey, don't kill me. This dude's bad." You're like, "No, dude, you're bad. Don't try to trick me."
But the thing is they wouldn't be hanging out. You got to think though, Dooku is a Sith, and he is the apprentice to the Sith Master.
But
he knows who the Sith Master is. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you at least test it? He's already locked up. Just test it. Find his lightsabers on him. He always has them. Actually, that's not true. He hides them in his furniture in his office sometimes. Right. But I mean,
also too, he's so old that you would think he's the master. He's also so powerful. You would think he's the master, and that Ventress was his Padawan. And so you'd be like,
they never even said that she was a Sith. She's not a Sith. She's an assassin.
But she was trained by Dooku.
Doesn't make her a Sith.
Kinda.
Once Sidious found out, he had her murdered.
The reason why is because he was kind of training her to be an apprentice. This happened in the old canon as well, where Darth Bane, he had an apprentice called Darth Xana, right?
Yep,
and then
I
believe she got her own apprentice without him knowing, and they were going to secretly take him down. So
yeah, they kind of did that.
So there's multiple reasons I can see why it wouldn't work. 1, let's say he did it. No one's going to believe him for potentially. 2, no one would believe that he's a Padawan to anybody because he's so old and powerful and in charge. No one's above him in the ranks of the Confederacy. If he has a master, why are they not in charge? 3,
but here's the thing.
Yeah, go
ahead. They also didn't believe he could be a murderer. And guess what? He is a murderer.
But there was evidence of that. There's no evidence that Palpatine was the Sith at the time. So let's play it out, right? So let's say Dooku goes, he's the Sith Lord you're looking for. I can give you information. Palpatine's like, he's lying to save his skin. Kill him. Do it. And it's going to end up the exact same way. Or, worst case scenario,
unless he's like, hey, I have holo recordings. Woo!
I'm pretty sure that Palpatine be like, look, that's not even my chin. I put on that's a fake chin. That's not mine. Someone faked that.
They could put his hood on for him while his hands are chained up. They put his hood on.
Like, yeah, but he's like, listen to my voice. Like him. Listen to my voice. It sounds nice. I don't sound like, do it. Anyways, that's kind of my thoughts on that. I mean, I get it, and it's definitely a question that is a good question because it's like, but what would have happened? Worst case scenario, Palpatine would have found a way to get out of it. It would have just perpetuated the plot unnecessarily to somewhere we don't need to be. We need to be ending the Clone Wars, not prolonging it. At this point, from a writing standpoint, killing Dooku just made sense. Also, he kills basically the former apprentice and takes his place. Because that would mean,
like, I guess they really needed to build to that moment where Sidious needed a new apprentice.
Yeah, instead of it being, oh, Anakin is going to be fighting Obi-Wan at the end, it would have been him fighting Dooku at the end for the seat at the table. If you had just continued that story, because you only had 2 hours.
Yeah.
So you're like, no, we got to get rid of things quick, end things quick with the war, so we could focus on the building of the Empire and the fall of the Jedi and the pregnancy and Anakin and Obi-Wan and Yoda and Sidious. You can't have that if Dooku's in any of that. Not really. Not in a way that I see that would have benefited the writing or the story. He needed to go. If it's an 8-episode miniseries, yeah, they could have done a whole lot more with Dooku. But that's what the 3 years of Clone Wars was for.
And we got plenty of Dooku, and I love him in that show. But I remember, like, when people were, like, cheering at certain parts. Mm-hmm. And there was the scene with R2 and the 2 super battle droids that were checking out the ships. Why did R2 pull the comlink out of his thing when he was walking over to the port to start the elevator?
Sounded like so he could hear them from the comlink. But if he had, you would think that he has receptors that he wouldn't need a comlink.
Yeah, you would think that they would like build that in there.
Yeah, he's got antennas and stuff. He could do life forms, but he can't pick up radio waves. Star Wars is broken, bro.
Yeah, it is.
We just broke it. But anyways, I don't know. That was a funny scene when he was like trying to hide it and he put the thing and closed it. I think it was for humorous effect only. And
that scene was pretty funny. That was a good thing.
It was funny and I accept it, but I don't think that it was necessary. Because again, he should have that. I'm saying, like, if you're looking at it from a logical standpoint, he should be able to pick up the radio signal without needing to do anything. But I don't know. I just work here.
Yeah, I like little things like that to add in just a small amount of comedy. But like what George Lucas was trying to do with episode 1, he threw in a whole main character and tried to make him the funny person.
Yeah.
You know? It didn't turn out very good for people. However, small little scenes like R2 taking down a couple droids.
Oh yeah. Much
or
better. I liked him getting kicked. Or no, when he was like, R2 will be along any minute, and then all of a sudden he's like screaming.
Flies through.
Yes. That hilarious because it's plausible, it makes perfect sense, and it's perfect timing with what Hayden Christensen had just said with what was going on.
Or like when he's when the elevator drops and Anakin's hanging there and the droids come up and they're like, hands up, Jedi.
Yeah, I'm cool with
Stuff
that.
like that. It's hilarious.
Me, they're kind of dumb droids, so it makes sense that they say hands up. They wouldn't think about, he's going to fall. Just kind of like in the Clone Wars movie when he's like, coordinates this, this, this. And he goes, coordinates what? You know, he's like, just shoot right there.
Shoot right there.
I don't mind little things like that at all.
Yeah.
But no, the R2 scenes were really funny. The comlink thing now, it kind of broke my thoughts on it though. But it was funny when he had the comlink, he threw it inside of himself and like slammed the door shut. You can still hear a because he puts the comlink inside of himself to hide
it's
it.
All muffled.
It's just muffled. And then the whole oil thing and then him doing the whole fire thing, that was cool. I like that. I wasn't a huge fan of the crashing ship thing. Like at first it was fine, but it just felt like it went on a little too long. Even when I was in theaters, the first time seeing it, I was even getting like, okay, come on. And then they crashed. I'm just like, eh. And then all of a sudden Obi-Wan says another happy landing. And I'm like, I'm back. You know what I mean? Like they brought it right back. It's
funny. Another happy landing.
But I didn't like the whole, like, just how long it took. It just took so long.
Yeah. You didn't need those many cuts between, like, seeing Anakin pilot the ship and cutting to Palpatine looking over at R2 and then cutting back.
I would have much rather had more of the temple being attacked or, like in the episode 3 video game where you fight Sindralag.
Yeah.
And some other Jedi. It's like I would have loved to see some of that, like we see in the hologram. That would have been a cool fight to see that, and then he sees a hologram of said fight later.
Yeah.
Then a extra long crash landing that we don't really necessarily need. Another happy landing, and it shows some humor between Anakin and Obi-Wan of I'm not brave enough for politics, and things like that, which we see in episode 2. He doesn't like politics. He observes politics because it's part of his job, really. But he doesn't like politics because he thinks that not everyone is on the up and up, and he's completely right. That's basically how it is. And then we see Padme, which if I recall, it sounds like she had a more southern accent in that scene for some reason.
Really? You think so?
Rewatched that one, and I don't know what it was, but it just reminded me that she had like a hint of a southern accent.
I'm pregnant.
Like that, you're putting on a little thick there, but yeah, more or less. I want to say, like, rewatch it after this, just that one scene, and I don't know why, but even I think in theaters when I saw it, for some reason it reminded me of a southern accent, just slightly. You're gonna come back and be like, dude, you're wrong. There's no southern accent. That's just Natalie Portman's voice. But I like that we also got to see Anakin interact with Bail Organa for a minute because we didn't see that in any of the movies. But I like seeing Anakin with Bail even for a moment because they're both Leia's father in a fashion. And it shows that they had some sort of good friendship of some sort.
Yeah.
That they were at least friendly enough. And I just like that little shot there. And then we see C-3PO fully golden, finally. Which in the old canon we see happens as, I think, a gift from Padme to Anakin. Because she's like, I can't handle your dirty asteroid anymore. He needs to be clean, and the only way I'm gonna do this, he's like, he's supposed to be. Well,
yeah. If you watch my last video, Anakin and Padme, instead of exchanging wedding rings, they exchanged droids. So I think she was more on the lines of, this dirty asteroid you gave me, I'm sick of it presenting the way that it is. It needs.
What's funny? He didn't even own the droid. The Lars did.
He didn't even own it. He built it. He was the original.
He built it, But then the Lars owned it because they bought Shmi. It was her property. So legally speaking, it was the Lars property. He snuck off on the ship and they're just like, all right, I guess you're coming with us. They stole the droids. That is why Lars doesn't like Anakin, because he's like, damn, that guy owes me a 3PO unit.
You mean Owen?
Owen Lars, yeah. It's still his name. But so Owen Lars, that's why he hates not Obi-Wan, but he hates Anakin, because he's just like, he stole a 3PO droid from me. And he doesn't realize it's the exact same one that he bought again later on.
And then it leaves
the Lars family was built twice for C-3PO, if you think about it.
Man, it's Star Wars is nothing about losing and bullying C-3PO.
I did really like. I felt like they didn't really do a whole lot with C-3PO in this movie compared to the last two. In the first one, we got to see him naked, quote unquote, and he was actually a bigger part of. It was just visually really cool to see him like that, right? Like this bare bones version.
You see the wires and you see the things turning and moving and everything.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
And then in episode 2,
he's got
in the
just
battle,
rusty coverings on.
Yeah, but then he's also part of the battle with it being a battle droid.
Yeah,
which was hilarious. And then in episode 3, he doesn't really do anything.
No, he's more at that point because with the Clone Wars kind of coming down to an end, he became more of what he was supposed to be doing, being a protocol droid, being there to be by Padme's side, whether she needed, refreshments or needed a translation, whatever, right. Since she dealt with different species.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he just became more of a servant than he was the first two movies.
I think he kind of, calmed down a little bit.
Maybe. I just feel like they had too much going on that Lucas was like, I just really can't give him anything to do. It would just muddle the movie, and I fully agree. So from what I understand, Lucas's original vision was that the first movie, this is like pre-episode 1 was even going to come out. We're talking maybe even before he did episode 4. There was like a sheet that I saw, and episode 1 was called The Beginning, I think, and he was going to just introduce a bunch of characters. Then 2, 3, and 4 were going to be the Clone Wars. And then 4, 5, 6 was going to be, or not 4, 5, 6, that'd be 5, 6, 7 was going to be the next trilogy. And like, so there was like a beginning episode and 3 Clone Wars episodes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it didn't pan out that way, obviously, but it would have been very interesting if they had 3 movies for Clone Wars, how they could have made this work, as well as what episode 1 would have looked like, because it would basically have been Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have a little Annie, although who knows, because they may have used Darth Maul in that movie instead of Jango Fett. Jango Fett might have been in the middle one. Who knows? Like, it's just so crazy when you think about like production and how things work with timing, because you never know what it could have been.
Sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties with our recording program, but unfortunately, Mike was not able to finish the video, so we're just going to continue, you and I. So we learned that General Grievous is on Utapau. It's a little fishy because the Chancellor's like, I want Anakin to go, but the Council's like, I don't like that idea. Obi-Wan's going to go. He's got more experience. Anakin goes to Yoda, talks about his dreams and everything like that, and essentially Yoda was like, don't worry if people die, which is kind of a dick thing to say, honestly. I know you're not supposed to have attachments and everything like that, and having attachments when somebody dies can, internally, like Anakin, lead you down to the path of the dark side. So he essentially says, don't worry about him, don't mourn him, don't miss him, I mean, as sad as it is, you gotta just move on if you're, gonna be a Jedi. You gotta do it, otherwise you're just gonna twist and turn and take yourself down a dark path. So Anakin is requested by the Chancellor to be his personal representative, which would make him a Jedi Master. I understand why they didn't make him a Master, but they put him on the Council, I think, just to see, because of the fact that now they're asking Anakin to spy on the Chancellor and see what his plans are, because they're realizing he is trying to stay in office longer than he really needs to be, because now the Clone Wars is coming to an end and he needs to give up his emergency powers, and he won't do it. They put him on the Council, then they decide to have Yoda go to Kashyyyk and take a reinforcement of clones to help the Wookiees. Obi-Wan, Mace, and Yoda are having the conversation on the way to drop off Yoda, but Obi-Wan is saying he's trying to defend Anakin, saying, he's the chosen one, isn't he? And then Yoda responds with, the prophecy could have been misread. There are just some people who don't like his arrogance and the fact that he was very much older than the rest of those who started at the Jedi Temple. And while this is going on, Anakin meets up with Palpatine, and he gives the spiel of Darth Plagueis, who could influence the midichlorians to create life, which is where the Darth Plagueis book comes into turn, that I talked about in episode 1, where Palpatine, learned this ability from Darth Plagueis, learned it, used it to manipulate the midichlorians in Shmi to create Anakin. But that's all been decanonized, and Anakin was just born by the Force. So now Obi-Wan is tasked with going to Utapau, and we see the final goodbye between Anakin and Obi-Wan. And there is kind of a play on it where Anakin's standing in the dark and Obi-Wan is standing in the light, foreshadowing, themselves. Obi-Wan being on the light side, Anakin turning into Darth Vader being on the dark side. But it's kind of a bittersweet moment because you know how close they are and you know how much they mean to each other, but with everything that's about to happen, it just kind of makes it a little bit more sad. So Obi-Wan's on Utapau. He finds out that Grievous, he's there. He's got thousands of battle droids. Obi-Wan then, finds where he's at. He's talking to the Separatist leaders, and he's telling them to go to the Mustafar system, but they're questioning his ability to keep them safe because Dooku's now dead, and he was his leader. So they leave. Obi-Wan does his iconic jump down. He does the hello there. They do their awesome fight. And this is the first time you get to see Dooku use all 4 lightsabers, and as they fight, he chases Grievous, and they do this insane fight while, Obi-Wan's riding this creature, and Grievous is on his motorized device. It's kind of like a one-wheeled motorcycle. It's kind of cool. But then they end up fighting. Obi-Wan gets, they try doing hand-to-hand combat, which is kind of dumb because you can tell that muscle against metal, not going to work. But then Obi-Wan opens up his chest piece. He gets thrown off, and he's able to use the Force to grab a weapon, a blaster, and kill Grievous. And then he does his iconic line where he says, "So uncivilized," which is a tie-in to episode 4 where Obi-Wan says, this is a delicate weapon, talking about Anakin's lightsaber for a more civilized age. And while this is going on, Anakin is having issues with, everything that's going on. And he goes to the Chancellor, and the Chancellor, essentially is like, I'm the Sith Lord. I want you to be with me so I can teach you this power so you can save your wife. And he then goes to Mace Windu. Mace Windu takes a few of the Jedi and tries to arrest Palpatine, but Palpatine is not going to go, and he pulls out his awesome, beautiful lightsaber. They start fighting, and in the novelization, it talks about how fast Sidious was going, which is why in the movie it looks like he's just stabbing them one by one and killing them all. But in the novelization, he's moving so fast that they were having a hard time parrying his attacks. But Mace being Mace and being able also to channel some of the dark side without losing it fully to the dark side, was able to keep up with Palpatine, or I guess now in this point Sidious, in lightsaber combat. And now after this, Anakin is now faced with a choice whether or not he wants to actually believe Palpatine and save his wife, or stay with the Jedi and be in secret with his wife, who still might possibly die. So, I mean, me being a married man, I understand what it, like, would entail, because you want your wife to live, you want your child to live. It makes sense. But then Anakin succumbs to his worry and to Sidious, and he is now dubbed Darth Vader after helping Sidious kill, or allegedly kill, Mace, throwing him out the window. And after all this happens, Sidious executes Order 66, which then the chips in the heads of the clones, them turn against Jedi. And, Palpatine makes up this whole story of, the Jedi attacked me, blah, 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 blah. I've been scarred, but now I made sure all the Jedi are gone because they're just attacking people now. And, after he executes Order 66, it goes scene by scene, like Plo Koon getting shot down in his fighter. And I'll go through each scene in another video of all of Order 66. But all these events happen within Order 66. And then Anakin's marching on the temple with the 501st. And then they end up slaughtering all these Jedi within the temple. And then while Obi-Wan is on Utapau, his experience is, he meets up back with Cody. Cody gives him his lightsaber, and, he rides off, but then he gets the order to kill the Jedi. And, he misses his shot. Obviously, he survives the fall. Obi-Wan does. He escapes, takes Grievous's ship, and tries to go and find someone to help him. And he meets up with Bail Organa, whose experience was he was going to the temple because he saw the smoke. And, Commander Appa was like, yo, you can't come in here. And then he tries to get in there, and then at gunpoint he says, you really can't come in here, dude. And then a Jedi pops out who is played by George Lucas's son. I don't know what the Jedi's name was, so if anybody knows, please put it down in the comments for me. But he ends up slicing down a bunch of troopers before he ends up getting killed, and then Bail Organa ends up rushing out of there. And so he meets up with Obi-Wan and Yoda, and they go to Bail Organa's ship, and they devise a plan that they need to go to the temple and send out a warning to all the other surviving Jedi to not return to the Jedi Temple. So that's what they do. They end up going to the temple. That's where they find out that Anakin has turned to the dark side and become Darth Vader. And then they decide that Obi-Wan needs to go fight Anakin, and Yoda's needing to go fight Sidious, which gives us two of the best fight scenes ever. So Anakin tells Padme that he's going to go to Mustafar and end the Separatists and end this war. Obi-Wan tries to confront Padme about that, try and find out where he's at, but she won't tell him, but he ends up sneaking on her ship as she goes to find him. And everything starts going crazy, and he's talking to Padme after he's sliced down a bunch of people. He then gets upset with her very, very fast, thinking and assuming that she's with Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan shows up and ruins everything. And in my opinion, that's what kills Padme. So she ends up fainting after she gets force choked by Anakin. Anakin and Obi-Wan start fighting, which is one of the best. And then we have, Yoda versus Sidious. And one of my favorite scenes is Sidious jumps to try and escape, and Yoda jumps in front of him, and he goes, if you're so powerful, why are you leaving? Calling him out on his BS. But then, there's the huge fight between the two, and there's, he narrowly escapes with his life. Then Bail Organa takes him away back to his ship because he needs to go to exile, be in exile. And so, Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting, and then they end up getting to the scene where Obi-Wan says, it's over, Anakin, I have the high ground. And the reason Anakin says, you underestimate my power, and Obi-Wan says, don't try it, is because the technique that Obi-Wan used on Darth Maul, Anakin kept watching it and, studying all these tactics and stuff like that and tried to master it. And Obi-Wan knew this, which is why he said, don't try it, because he knew he was going to fail. And so he chops him up, leaves him, which is super sad, takes his lightsaber, which then we see in episode 4 again. And And then Sidious shows up, takes him, and in that time, Padme's having twins on Polis Massa. She ends up dying because of what they call, in real life terms, which is what Debbie Reynolds passed away from, is what they call broken heart syndrome. So yeah, so she really died because she was brokenhearted. She was sad. The love of her life, just essentially crushed everything and lied about it. And so in that time, Darth Vader's now being built and risen. And we see Hayden Christensen in the Darth Vader suit for the first time. So after all of that happens, Obi-Wan takes himself and Luke to Tatooine to watch over him and, continue some training. And Bail Organa is taking Leia to be his daughter. And Yoda's going to Dagobah. And we get that awesome scene where Obi-Wan comes down on the creature and, walks up to Owen and Beru, hands them Luke in that scene where they're just staring at the suns. The Jedi theme song, it's just with strings is just so powerful. It's so pretty. But I'd love to know what your guys' thoughts are on this whole movie. Again, I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. I'll have Mike back on for another episode. But that is everything. Thanks for sticking around and talking with me about Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow the show at Just Another Star Wars Podcast on TikTok and Just Another Star Wars Pod on Instagram. But that is everything, and may the Force be with you.